To all rational thinkers, I am your strategic observer, Maggie Liu. Now witness how a noble young lady abandoned by a perfect gentleman uses a sensational corporate acquisition to trade a negative investment for the true supreme ruler of the realm. After my marriage negotiations with the newly crowned top scholar began, the distant cousin living in his family home had her engagement broken off, so he gave her the wedding dress I had spent 3 years sewing. When I confronted him, he even had that cousin move into the top scholar's residence, which I had paid to renovate. Then he gently rebuked me. As a young lady from a distinguished family, how can you be so narrow-minded? My cousin's family has fallen on hard times, and she has to live under another's roof. It is only natural that I should show her a little more care. Having me look after her personally will help her recover and study. You are a woman too. You should understand how miserable she is. On the day he was supposed to deliver the betrothal gifts, he did not come. He merely sent word through someone else. My cousin cannot stop vomiting. I need to pick plums for her in the south of the city. The 3 letters and 6 rites are nothing but cumbersome formalities. Sincerity is all that matters. We can discuss it another day. Discuss my ass. I turned around and stopped the carriage of the capital's infamous wastrel crown prince. Pei Yan, I have brought a vast fortune. Is my dowry enough to buy the position of crown princess? If it is, come with me to the government office and sign the contract at once. The capital, the top scholar's residence. Inside the vermilion gates, incense smoke curled through the air. I stood in the center of the courtyard that the Sioux family had spent 10,000 taels of silver renovating and coldly stared at the woman wearing my golden threaded soft phoenix wedding dress. Liu Ruyan was slender and frail, her flowing sleeves hanging low. The wedding dress that belonged to me was slightly too large on her, making her look even more like a delicate white lotus on the verge of collapse. Cousin, this wedding dress is beautiful, but Liu Ruyan's voice was weak, and her eyes reddened on cue. Timidly tugging at Gu Chenyuan's sleeve, she asked, "Will Sister Muyan be angry when she sees it?" Gu Chenyuan stood beside her, tall and proud in the brocade robe of the newly crowned top scholar. At Liu Ruyan's words, his brows abruptly knitted and his icy gaze fell squarely upon me. Muyan. Ruyan has just had her engagement broken off by the groom's family for no reason and is exhausted in body and mind. It is only a wedding dress. As a young lady from a distinguished family, why must you be so petty? Gu Chenyuan's voice carried the lofty tone of a man lecturing his inferior. If you want one, simply have the embroiderers make another. Looking at the 2 of them, I almost laughed aloud. Make another? Top scholar Gu, are you blind? I raised my hand and pointed at the wedding dress on Liu Ruyan, my voice cracking like ice beneath a step. I personally reeled the silk, used 999 strands of gold thread, and spent 3 full years embroidering that soft golden phoenix. It is easy for you to say, make another. 3 years ago, Gu Chenyuan was nothing more than a penniless scholar from a humble family who could not even afford the examination fee. My Sioux family recognized his modest talent, disregarded his poverty and low birth, exhausted our resources to send him to the capital for the examinations, helped him cultivate connections at court, and supported him every step of the way until he became the top scholar. Now that he had won first place, the first thing he did was not visit the Sioux family to discuss the wedding date, but bring this distant cousin, whose family had fallen on hard times, to the capital. He said she was alone and helpless and needed someone to care for her. I endured it. He said she was sickly and insisted on living in the sunniest main courtyard, the bridal chamber I had personally designed for our wedding. I endured that too. But today he had opened the SU family's storeroom without permission and put my wedding dress on this scheming little hypocrite. Embarrassed at being exposed in public, Gu Chenyuan immediately stepped forward and shielded Liu Ruyan firmly behind him. Ruyan has suffered a miserable fate and must live under another's roof. It is only natural that I should show her a little more care. Look at yourself. You are bitter and cruel, without a trace of the generosity expected of a woman from a distinguished family. Ruyan is frail. Will you only be satisfied when you have driven her to death? At just the right moment, Liu Ruyan collapsed into Gu Chenyuan's arms, panting delicately and weeping. Cousin, it is all my fault. Do not quarrel with sister. I will take it off right now. Cough, cough. Thou she said she would take it off. Her hands clutched the lapels tightly, and her body went limp as though she had no bones. Gu Chenyuan's eyes reddened with distress as he glared furiously at me. Su Muyan, if anything happens to Ruyan, I will never forgive you. I have decided that from today onward, Ruyan will live permanently in the main courtyard, and I will care for her personally so that she need not endure the anger of someone like you outside. What attentive personal care. What an unforgiving man. Looking at Gu Chenyuan's face, twisted by selfishness. I felt the last trace of affection I had once held turn instantly into nauseating ash. Gu Chenyuan, I slowly stepped forward, my gaze as cold as a blade. You seem to have forgotten two things. First, the deed to this residence bears my name, Su Muan. Second, the third-rank official's robe on your body was purchased with the Su family's silver. Gu Chenyuan's expression shifted. What do you mean? Too tired to waste another word, I raised my hand and snapped my fingers. A thunderous crash suddenly sounded at the gates. Dozens of family guards dressed in black with flexible sabers at their waists surged into the courtyard like ravenous wolves and instantly surrounded the entire top scholar's residence. The Su family's chief steward stood solemnly beside me, his voice booming like a bell. Eldest young lady, seal every item in this residence that belongs to the Su family, I ordered without the slightest emotion. As for the residence itself, clear it out at once. Do not leave so much as a speck of dust for them. Gu Chenyuan turned pale with shock. Su Mian, have you gone mad? I am the top scholar of this dynasty. How dare you confiscate my residence? Your residence, I sneered. With that meager monthly salary of yours, could you afford even an inch of land in the capital? As I spoke, two burly matrons charged forward and pinned Liu Ruyan firmly from either side. Our cousins, save me, save me! Liu Ruyan shrieked. Stop. I order you to stop. Gu Chenyuan tried to intervene, but two Su family guards pressed cold blades directly against his neck, leaving him unable to move. The matrons worked swiftly. With a sharp rip, they tore the golden-threaded soft phoenix wedding dress straight off Liu Ruyan. No, Liu Ruyan collapsed to the ground in disarray, weeping until her voice broke. I took the torch handed to me by a guard and looked down at the wedding dress that carried 3 years of my foolish devotion. Then I released my hand. The flame touched the gold thread and finest shoe brocade with a roar. Fire surged upward and swallowed the entire wedding dress in an instant. The flames illuminated my cold face and Gu Chenyuan's terrified, deathly pale expression. Su Muyan, you dared to burn it. Even Gu Chenyuan's teeth were chattering. This young lady finds a dress contaminated by garbage too filthy to keep. I brushed the ash from my hands and turned toward the gates. Top Scholar Gu, tomorrow was supposed to be the day you delivered the betrothal gifts to the Su residents. At the threshold, I stopped and turned my head with an extraordinarily mocking smile. But now it seems unnecessary. From this day onward, you take your narrow path, and I will walk my broad road. If you dare trade on the Su family's reputation again. My gaze hardened. If I could lift you into the clouds, I can personally hurl you into hell. With that, I strode out of the top scholar's residence without looking back. Behind me came the deafening crash of objects being smashed, Gu Chenyuan's hysterical roars, and Liu Ruyan's desperate wails listening to them. I felt the resentment in my heart vanish completely. Wasting 3 years on an opportunistic man like him was the greatest stain on my life. Su Muyan's life. Outside, the sunlight was dazzling. The chief steward bowed respectfully. Young lady, tomorrow's betrothal ceremony has been cancelled. I fear the rumors in the capital will be unfavorable to you. Those censors and literati will surely say you are arrogant and domineering and were abandoned by the top scholar. Abandoned. I let out a cold laugh. The people of the capital enjoy a spectacle, so I shall put on a grand one for them. I smoothed my sleeves and said coldly, prepare the carriage, we are going to Vermilion Bird Avenue. Young lady, what are we going to Vermilion Bird Avenue for? To stop the Crown Prince's carriage. Arrogance and resolve flashed in my eyes. Gu Guchenyuan thinks becoming top scholar means he can trample me underfoot. Then I shall trade him for a man who can take me straight to the summit. Vermilion Bird Avenue, the busiest place in the capital. Today, however, the avenue felt unusually grim. The Imperial Guards had cleared a broad passage between the two sides of the street. Commoners moved aside and whispered among themselves. In the distance, an extravagantly luxurious four-wheeled carriage approached slowly. 4 pure black Fergana horses without a single stray marking drew it. The carriage was made of the finest red sandalwood and inlaid with gold and jade. As the wind blew, the Murphic gauze curtains over the windows gently stirred. A token of the Eastern Palace hung from the carriage roof, gleaming with an icy light. It was the Crown Prince, Peiyan, the mad Crown Prince is known throughout the Daxia dynasty. Rumor said he was perverse and ruthless, bloodthirsty by nature, and so fearsome that even the Emperor regarded him with caution. Almost no one dared provoke him. Watching the noble carriage approach, I did not hesitate. Lifting the hem of my fiery red skirt, I ran straight into the middle of the avenue. Insolence! Who dares block the Crown Prince's carriage? The commander of the Imperial Guards turned pale with shock and leveled his spear in an instant, its cold tip pointing straight at my throat. The surrounding commoners screamed in fright. I stood in the center of the road, my posture as straight as a pine, allowing the strong wind to scatter my hair. Ignoring the spear before me, I looked past the Imperial Guards and stared directly at the faint silhouette behind the Murphic gauze curtain. This common woman is Sumian. I have an enormous business proposition I wish to discuss with Your Highness the Crown Prince. The street fell dead silent. She dared approach the notoriously murderous Crown Prince to discuss business. Had the Sioux family's eldest daughter gone mad? After a moment of silence, a long jade-like hand with well-defined knuckles slowly lifted the Murphic gauze curtain. It revealed an incomparably handsome face that radiated profound danger. Peiyan reclined against a soft couch, his narrow phoenix eyes half-lidded, and his deep pupils swirling with a chilling darkness. The corner of his mouth curved in amusement. The Sioux family's eldest young lady. I heard you caused quite a spectacle at the top scholar's residence today. What? You have come for me so quickly? His information was certainly quick. Unafraid of his scrutiny, I drew a thick stack of ink-scented papers from inside my robe. They were the deeds to the Shu family's trading houses throughout the country, the rights to operate the salt and iron trade and bank drafts worth a full 30 million taels of silver. I raised these immensely valuable documents high and declared every word with ringing force. Peiyan, I have brought a vast fortune as my dowry. Is this enough to buy the position of Crown Princess? If you think it is enough, come to the government office and sign a marriage contract with me immediately. At those words, the entire avenue went silent. Everyone stared at me as though I were a monster, buying the position of Crown Princess with a vast fortune. Nothing so earth-shatteringly absurd had ever been heard in 1,000 years. Peiyan inside the carriage froze for a moment. Then, as though he had heard an irresistible joke, he began to laugh softly. His laughter was low and magnetic, yet carried a danger that made one's blood run cold. By the position of my Crown Princess, Peiyan slowly stepped down from the carriage. He was tall, and his black dragon robe embroidered in gold made him resemble a demon sovereign descended upon the mortal world. He walked toward me step by step and looked down from above. Then his cold fingers suddenly seized my chin, forcing me to raise my head and meet his gaze. Sumian, what do you take my Eastern Palace for? A place you can enter with money. His fingertips were cold, and a bloodthirsty light flickered in his eyes. So you want to use me as a shield? Do you believe I will snap your neck right now? Agony shot through my chin, but I did not so much as blink. I stared directly into his eyes and lowered my voice so that only the two of us could hear. Your Highness, stop acting. Peiyan's gaze abruptly tightened. I continued with a smile. 3 days ago, the second prince secretly contacted the Ministries of Revenue and War and cut off 3 months of provisions and pay for your Northwestern Army, hoping to force you into a disastrous defeat at the border. And the Sioux family's merchant caravans control the largest granaries in the realm. As long as you marry me, 300,000 dan of military grain will reach the Northwestern Front within half an hour. Furthermore, My smile deepened. The Su family's intelligence network can help you obtain every piece of irrefutable evidence that the second prince is colluding with an enemy kingdom. Will your highness accept this business deal or not? The air froze in an instant. Pei Yan's fingers tightened slightly around my chin. The amusement in his eyes vanished, replaced by killing intent as sharp as a blade. At that moment, the wastrel crown prince, rumored to care only for pleasure, finally bared the fangs hidden beneath his sheepskin. He stared fixedly at me, as though trying to see through my soul. After a long while, he suddenly released me, took a handkerchief from his robe, and elegantly wiped his fingers. Interesting. He turned, lifted the carriage curtain, and glanced sideways at me. Eldest young lady Su, get in. There is no need for a contract at morning court tomorrow. I will ask Father Emperor to issue an imperial decree granting us marriage. The corner of his mouth rose, revealing an extraordinarily wicked smile. But I warn you, once you board my carriage, you will never get off again for the rest of your life. I brushed the dust from my skirt and climbed without hesitation into the carriage that symbolized supreme power and endless danger. The words "turn back" do not exist in my dictionary. The carriage sped away in a cloud of dust. It left behind an avenue full of stunned commoners and an enormous wave about to unleash a violent storm across the capital. Early the next morning, dark circles under both eyes, Gu Chenyuan paced anxiously through the empty top scholar's residence. The previous day, Sun Mian had taken away every valuable object in the residence. Even the bed in the main courtyard had been removed. Now only an empty shell remained. Cousin, wearing an old plain dress, Liu Ruyan approached with tearful eyes. Has sister truly abandoned you? Then what about our marriage? Silence. Gu Chenyuan snapped irritably. A faint panic stirred in his heart. Over the past 3 years, he had grown accustomed to Su Mian's meticulous care and her endless financial support. In his eyes, Su Mian had merely spoken in anger. For a merchant's daughter, marrying the newly crowned top scholar was already a blessing earned by her ancestors. How could she truly bear to give him up? Hump, she is only playing hard to get. Gu Chenyuan snorted and straightened his clothes. Today was supposed to be the day I delivered the betrothal gifts. I shall personally visit the Su residence. As long as I give her away to save face and promise her the position of principal wife, she will obediently offer her vast fortune and beg me to forgive her. As he spoke, confidence and arrogance returned to Gu Chenyuan's eyes. In his mind, all women depended on men. No matter how wealthy Su Mian was, without the support of a top scholar like him, she would never be able to hold her head high in the capital. However, before he could leave the gates, the frantic beat of hooves and a deafening clamor of gongs suddenly sounded in the street. News. A servant from the top scholar's residence rushed inside in a panic and nearly fell flat on his face. Top scholar, something terrible has happened. Great joy. No, a great disaster. Gu Chenyuan frowned. Why are you panicking? What happened? The servant's face was deathly pale. Pointing toward the street, he stammered. An imperial decree. An imperial decree from the palace has arrived at the Su residence. His Majesty has granted a marriage. Gu Chenyuan rejoiced. Naturally, he assumed the emperor had learned of his marriage to Su Mian and had issued a special decree to bestow imperial favor. Su Mian truly has some skill. She actually managed to beg His Majesty for a marriage decree. Gu Chenyuan straightened his robes with a smug smile. Come, accompany me to the Su residence to receive the decree. No, top scholar. The servant was nearly in tears. The person His Majesty granted the marriage to was not you. Gu Chenyuan's smile froze. What did you say? Not me, then who? The servant swallowed and trembled as he uttered the words. It was His Highness the Crown Prince. Boom. It was as though a thunderbolt exploded inside Gu Chenyuan's mind. His entire body reeled as if struck. He staggered 3 steps backward, his face as pale as paper. Impossible, absolutely impossible. Gu Chenyuan roared hysterically. How exalted is the Crown Prince? Su Mian is nothing but a merchant's daughter. How could the Crown Prince possibly desire her? What nonsense are you spouting? I am not lying. The servant cried from his knees. The entire capital knows. Yesterday, eldest young lady Su stopped the Crown Prince's carriage on Vermilion Bird Avenue and offered a dowry of 30 million taels. At morning court today, the Crown Prince personally petitioned His Majesty to make eldest young lady Su the Crown Princess. The betrothal gifts from the Ministry of Rights stretch a full 10 li from the Eastern Palace to the Su residence. Crown Princess. Guchenyuan's eyes went blank as he murmured those words. The powerful elite he had dreamed of attaching himself to, the lofty station he might never touch even after a lifetime of struggle. Su Muyan had become the future mother of the nation overnight. Cousin, how is this possible? Liu Ruyan was also stunned and clutched Gu Chenyuan's arm tightly. Get away from me. Gu Chenyuan flung his arm out and shoved Liu Ruyan heavily to the ground, his eyes bloodshot. He charged from the top scholar's residence like a madman and ran straight toward the Su residence. By then, the gates of the Su residence were already surrounded by a vast, boisterous crowd. A palace eunuch was loudly proclaiming the imperial decree. By the mandate of heaven, the emperor decrees. The Su family has a daughter named Muyan, dignified, virtuous, and wise, an exemplar of propriety. She is hereby betrothed to Crown Prince Pei Yan as his principal consort. An auspicious date shall be chosen for the wedding. Respect this decree. This common woman accepts the decree. Long live His Majesty. Long live His Majesty. Long may he reign. Dressed in a magnificent red gown, I graciously accepted the imperial decree amid countless flattering and envious gazes. The surrounding commoners dropped to their knees and cried greetings to Her Highness the Crown Princess. Just then, a disheveled figure suddenly burst from the crowd. Su Muyan, I do not believe it. I do not believe you are truly marrying that madman. Hair disheveled and eyes bloodshot, Gu Chenyuan tried to charge at me, but the Su family's guards pinned him firmly to the ground with long staffs. I looked down at Gu Chenyuan sprawled on the ground without the slightest ripple in my eyes, as though I were watching a rabid wild dog. Top Scholar Gu, mind your words. I waved the imperial decree, and my icy voice rang through the crowd. Slandering the Crown Prince is a capital crime punishable by the extermination of 9 clans. You wanton harlot. Gu Chenyuan lay on the ground and roared through gritted teeth. To attach yourself to power, you would willingly marry a bloodthirsty wastrel like Pei Yan. What did our 3 years together mean to you? The surrounding commoners looked at him in disgust as they listened to his abuse. Through the Shu family's deliberate efforts, word of what happened at the top scholar's residence yesterday had already spread throughout the city. Everyone knew the newly crowned top scholar had lived off a woman, only to steal her wedding dress after winning first place and give it to his cousin. He was a disgrace to the scholar official class. I chuckled, slowly walked up to him, and lowered my voice. Gu Chenyuan, 3 years ago, I pulled you from the mud. Today, I can trample you back into it. Do you not adore your precious first love, your dear cousin? I straightened, speaking loudly enough for everyone to hear. Today I shall grant your wish, men. Escort Top Scholar Gu back to his empty residence, and inform the Ministry of Revenue that Top Scholar Gu owes the Su family 30,000 taels from the year he travelled for the examinations. He has 3 days to repay it. If he cannot, a cruel light flashed in my eyes. Then take his title as top scholar in payment. Gu Chenyuan looked as though he had been struck by lightning. He collapsed completely, and profound terror and regret finally appeared in his eyes. At last he realized he had lost more than a woman who loved him. He had lost the broad road to the summit of power that had once been within his reach. Only 3 days after the uproar over the betrothal gifts, another enormous wave shook the capital. The once lofty, newly crowned top scholar Gu Chenyuan was unable to repay the Su family's 30,000 tael debt. The authorities directly seized every property in his name, 30,000 taels. It was the silver the Su family had spent on him over the past 3 years, from food, clothing, housing, and travel to every payment made to cultivate official connections. The Su family's accountants had recorded each expense clearly in black and white, every document bearing Gu Chenyuan's private seal. When I was his intended wife, it had been affection. Now that we had broken with each other, it was debt. The authorities plastered thick seals across the gates of the top scholar's residence. wearing an old scholar's robe washed nearly white. Gu Chenyuan stood dazed in the street with 2 battered bundles behind him. Liu Ruyan cowered behind him. Her former delicate smugness was gone, leaving only resentment and despair in her eyes. "Cousin, what will we do now? We do not even have a place to stay," Liu Ruyan wept until her eyes turned red. Gu Chenyuan clenched his fists, veins bulging on his forehead. Seeing the people under the eaves point and whisper, he felt shame devour his heart like 10,000 ants. "We will find Shumian." Gu Chenyuan ground his molars, obsessive madness gleaming in his eyes. "She merely lost her temper. I refuse to believe she feels nothing for me. I will beg her, as long as she agrees to clear my debt." The 2 of them trudged one after the other to the gates of the Su residence, utterly dejected. The gates were already surrounded by tall, imposing, murderous golden crow guards sent by the Eastern Palace. Muyan, come out and see me." Gu Chenyuan, blocked outside by the guards' spears, screamed hysterically. "I know I was wrong. I should not have given the wedding dress to Ruyan. I will make Ruyan kneel and apologize to you. Is that not enough? Come out and see me." Liu Ruyan's eyes darted. Then, with a thud, she dropped to her knees on the steps outside the Su residence and wailed loudly, "Eldest young Lady Su, it is all my fault. I seduced and deceived him. I was greedy and shameless enough to covet that wedding dress. Please show mercy and spare my cousin. My cousin is the top scholar of this dynasty and has a boundless future. How can you destroy his entire life over such a small matter? Ruyan is willing to serve you like an ox or horse. Please restore my cousin's title." Her kneeling and wailing immediately drew a large crowd of passing commoners. People who did not know the truth began whispering. "Eldest young Lady Su is the future crown princess now. But is she not being too ruthless?" "Exactly. Top scholar Gu is still a man with an honored title, yet she has driven him onto the streets." Hearing the rumors in the crowd, a sinister light appeared in Gu Chenyuan's eyes. This was precisely what he wanted. Sumyeon cared more than anything for her reputation as a noble young lady. If he made the scene large enough and placed her in an impossible position, she would be forced to appear and spare him. However, the gates of the Su residence slowly opened. To everyone's surprise, the person who emerged was not me but the crown prince, Pei Yan, dressed in a purple and gold python robe and wearing a languid yet dangerous expression. He held a thick bundle of documents and looked down at Liu Ruyan and Gu Chenyuan kneeling on the ground. The surrounding discussion stopped instantly. Everyone dropped to their knees, not daring even to breathe loudly. "Your Highness the Crown Prince." Gu Chenyuan trembled, cold sweat instantly soaking his back. Pei Yan slowly descended the steps. His lone wolf eyes swept coldly over Liu Ruyan, and the corner of his mouth curved in amusement. "You are Liu Ruyan, Minister Liu's illegitimate daughter." Liu Ruyan's delicate body trembled and panic flashed in her eyes. She hurriedly kowtowed. In answer to your highness, this common woman is she. You just said Sumyeon ruined Gu Chenyuan's future." Pei Yan chuckled, his gaze instantly turning colder than ice. "I would say the person who truly ruined him was your treacherous father." With that, Pei Yan flung the documents straight into Liu Ruyan's face. They scattered across the ground, each one stamped with the crimson seals of the Ministry of Justice and the Court of Judicial Review. "Open your worthless eyes and look," Pei Yan's iron-cold voice rang through the crowd. "Minister Liu colluded with the second prince, conspired with an enemy kingdom, and embezzled 3 million taels of military pay. And you, Liu Ruyan, approached the newly crowned top scholar, Gu Chenyuan, on the second prince's orders, intending to draw him into the second prince's faction and frame loyal officials." "What?" Gu Chenyuan looked as though he had been struck by lightning and stared at Liu Ruyan in disbelief. Liu Ruyan's face turned paper white in an instant. She collapsed to the ground, forgetting even to cry. Pei Yan walked up to Gu Chenyuan and lifted his chin with the tip of his boot, his eyes filled with mockery and contempt. "Great top scholar Gu, you thought you had found a pitiful, long-lost first love. You were merely a dog in her hands. You treasured another person's cast-offs and offered your own fiancé's vast fortune with both hands. Your stupidity has truly opened my eyes. The surrounding crowd erupted. Heavens, so Liu Ruyan is the daughter of a traitor. Was top scholar Gu kicked in the head by a donkey? He abandoned the richest family's eldest daughter to cherish a traitor's daughter. He deserves it. He lived off a woman while pretending to be superior, only to be played by a scheming hypocrite, Pa. Under the overwhelming curses and mockery, Gu Chenyuan completely broke down. He glared at Liu Ruyan, his eyes brimming with towering hatred and despair. Ruyan, is what His Highness said all true? Have you been using me all along? Liu Ruyan trembled violently, unable to utter a single word in her defense. Only then did I slowly emerge from the gates. Wrapped in a sable cloak Pei Yan had personally draped around my shoulders, and walk up to Genyuan. I drew a 10,000 tael banknote from my robe and tossed it down on his head. Genyuan, in consideration of our former affection, I reward you these 10,000 taels to buy a coffin. I linked my arm through Pei Yan's and could not even be bothered to spare the two of them another glance. Men, take Liu Ruyan, daughter of a traitor, to the court of judicial review. As for Gu Chenyuan, I smiled faintly. Strip him of his title as top scholar and bar him from office for life. No, Miyan. I was wrong. I was truly wrong. Gu Chenyuan crawled on his knees and tried to grab the hem of my skirt, but a golden crow guard kicked him away. He slammed into a stone pillar and spat a mouthful of blood. I considered even looking back at him, a stain upon my eyes. Those who follow me shall prosper. Those who oppose me shall perish. This was merely the opening act of my grand revenge. 1 month later, the capital of Daxia witnessed its grandest wedding in a century. The Eastern Palace was welcoming its crown princess. A 10-lie procession of red dowry chests stretched from the Sioux residence to the gates of the Forbidden City. The entire Vermilion Bird Avenue was adorned with crimson brocade like a writhing dragon of flame. I wore a 10-jin phoenix coronet and a crimson phoenix amid peonies wedding dress that 100 of the palace's finest embroiderers had rushed to complete in a month. I sat inside a golden-roofed bridal sedan, carried by 16 men. The sedan swayed gently as jubilant music outside rose to the heavens. Yet beneath the splendor and commotion, I keenly sensed a murderous tension pervading the air. The second prince, Pei Zhao, would never stand by and watch Pei Yan and me complete our wedding without interference. The Sioux family's wealth combined with the Eastern Palace's military authority was enough to crush him completely. Today's wedding was his only chance to reverse his fortunes. Sure enough, as the wedding procession reached the Imperial Avenue before the palace, disaster suddenly struck. Bang! A shrill signal flare suddenly exploded in the sky. Hundreds of black-clad death warriors, armed with crossbows, instantly surged onto the towers lining both sides of the avenue. Kill, seize the traitor Pei Yan and the Sioux woman. His Second Highness will reward you handsomely. The sharp cries shattered the festive atmosphere. Terrified commoners screamed and fled in every direction. A dense rain of arrows blotted out the sky and poured toward the bridal sedan like a swarm of locusts. Protect the crown princess. The commander of the Golden Crow Guards roared, drawing his saber. Inside the sedan, however, I did not so much as blink. Calmly, I picked up a piece of osmanthus cake from the small table and took an elegant bite. The roof of the bridal sedan exploded beneath a blast of overwhelming internal force. A tall, cold figure in red descended before me like a divine warrior. The black jade sword in his hand spun into an impenetrable screen of light, deflecting every arrow aimed at me. It was Pei Yan. He too wore crimson wedding robes today, tall and slender with his hair flying. He bore a fearsomely arrogant smile upon his flawless face. Muyan, I told you today's spectacle would be lively enough. He swept an arm around my slender waist, carried me from the shattered bridal sedan and leaped onto his Fergana horse, hold tight. His deep voice sounded beside my ear. I locked both arms around his broad shoulders. The beaded curtain hanging from my phoenix coronet swung violently before my eyes, reflecting the blood-soaked battlefield around us. The ambushing death warriors fell in waves, but the unified thunder of heavy hooves sounded behind them. Deputy Commander Li Gui of the Capital Defense Garrison led 3,000 heavy cavalrymen to surround the entire Imperial Avenue. The second prince, Pei Zhao, slowly rode out from behind the cavalry in full armor, laughing hideously and triumphantly. Ha ha ha, Pei Yan, my dear imperial brother. Today is the day you die. Your collusion with the Sioux family to commit treason is proven beyond doubt. I act under imperial decree to suppress the traitors and execute you two adulterous curs on the spot. The second prince drew his saber and pointed it at Pei Yan and me. Kill them. Leave no one alive. Facing 3,000 heavy cavalrymen, the Eastern Palace's few hundred golden crow guards looked pitifully thin. Madness blazed in the second prince's eyes, as though he could already see the day he ascended the throne. Yet Pei Yan did not even furrow his brow. He gently stroked my long hair as I rested in his arms, the corner of his mouth curving as though he were looking at a fool. Second brother, do you think? I truly spent this entire month doing nothing but preparing for the wedding. The second prince's expression shifted. What do you mean? Pei Yan did not answer. He merely raised one hand and clapped twice. Rumble, the thunderous beat of hooves, heavy as Mount Tai, suddenly surged from above the city walls and every direction. All 4 gates of the imperial city burst open. A full 20,000 soldiers of the nation-guarding army, clad in black iron heavy armor and armed with spears, poured forward like a black flood and surrounded the capital defense garrison's 3,000 rebels without leaving the slightest gap. At their head stood an old general with a dark red face and a booming voice. The nation-guarding general is here. The traitor Pei Zhao has colluded with foreign enemies and intends to rebel. All troops heed my command, kill without mercy. The second prince's face twitched and terror filled his eyes. The nation-guarding army. Are they not stationed at the northwestern border? How could they return to the capital so quickly? I raised my head from Pei Yan's arms and looked coldly at the second prince. Your second highness, you cut off 3 months of provisions and pay for the northwestern army. But you forgot the Shu family's merchant caravans stretch across the realm. Half a month ago, the Sioux family used 10,000 camels to deliver 300,000 dan of grain and military pay to the northwest. The nation-guarding general entered the capital with light cavalry 3 days ago under a secret decree. He has been waiting for you to walk into the trap today. Number. Impossible. This is impossible. The second prince panicked completely and screamed, Ligui, charge, break through. However, before the elite forces of the 20,000-strong nation-guarding army, the 3,000 troops of the capital defense garrison were like paper and were instantly torn apart. The battle became a one-sided slaughter. In less than half an instant, corpses covered the ground. The nation-guarding general knocked the second prince, Pei Zhao, from his horse with a single thrust of his spear and captured him alive like a dead dog. Amid the blood mist filling the sky, Pei Yan held me tightly in his arms. He looked down at me. The violence in his eyes receded, leaving only boundless tenderness and dominance. Crown Princess, the obstacle has been cleared away. Come, follow me to the Golden Throne Hall and let us marry. Amid blood and murderous tension throughout the city, we stepped across our enemy's blood and entered the supreme summit of imperial power. Inside the Golden Throne Hall, the atmosphere was heavy enough to suffocate. On the dragon throne, the old emperor coughed violently, his face pale and his eyes burning with towering fury. In the center of the hall, the second prince, Pei Zhao, knelt tightly bound. His armor was tattered, and his face was covered in filthy blood. Beside him, the empress knelt and kowtowed repeatedly, weeping like pear blossoms drenched in rain. Your Majesty, please investigate. Zhao has been wronged. It must be the crown prince and that Sioux woman who framed him. The old emperor said nothing. His cold gaze swept toward Pei Yan and me, standing on the left side of the hall. We still wore our immaculate red and gold wedding robes and stood shoulder to shoulder like 2 deities who ruled all living beings. Imperial brother, the second prince roared hysterically. To obtain the Sioux family's wealth, you forged evidence to frame me. Father Emperor, this son has a secret letter as proof. The second prince abruptly turned toward a trembling figure standing in a corner of the hall. The man wore cheap servant's clothes and looked utterly haggard. It was Gu Chenyuan. Gu Chenyuan, bring out the letter. The second prince cried in delight. Tell Father Emperor how the Sioux family secretly recruited troops and plotted treason. So after being stripped of office, Gu Chenyuan had secretly joined the second prince to take revenge upon me. Every minister in the hall instantly turned toward Gu Chenyuan. Gu Chenyuan drew a letter from his robe and walked step by step into the hall. He looked deeply at me, his eyes filled with complicated madness. Your Majesty, Gu Chenyuan's voice was hoarse. This commoner is guilty. Speak, the old emperor roared. Striking the table, Gu Chenyuan drew a deep breath, suddenly dropped to his knees, and raised the letter high in both hands. The person this commoner wishes to report is the second prince, Pei Zhao. What? The second prince's eyes nearly popped from their sockets. Gu Chenyuan shouted, to recruit this commoner, the second prince personally admitted that he colluded with Minister Liu to embezzle military pay and planned to assassinate the crown prince and eldest young lady Su on their wedding day. This letter contains the second prince's own handwritten plot sent to Minister Liu. Though eldest young lady Su ended her engagement to this commoner, I am still a subject of Daxia and could never help a tyrant commit evil. Your Majesty, please judge clearly. Gu Chenyuan, you beast, how dare you betray me? The second prince lunged as if to bite Gu Chenyuan to death, but the golden crow guards pinned him firmly to the floor. The sudden reversal sent an uproar through the entire hall. I watched coldly without the slightest ripple in my heart. Gu Chenyuan was merely a corner dog making one desperate leap. Did he think betraying the second prince would earn merit and atone for his crimes? How naive. Pei Yan took the opportunity to draw another thick stack of irrefutable evidence from his sleeve and presented it to the chief eunuch. Father Emperor, these are all the accounts recording second brother's collusion with an enemy kingdom and his purchases of gunpowder. Every entry bears Minister Liu's and second brother's own signatures. As the old emperor examined the irrefutable evidence, his face turned from blue to white. Then he suddenly spat a mouthful of blood. Unfilial son, unfilial son. The old emperor pointed at the second prince, his voice trembling uncontrollably. Hear my decree, the second prince, Pei Zhao, colluded with foreign enemies and committed treason. From this day onward, he is stripped to commoner status and granted a cup of poisoned wine. After death, he shall not be buried in the imperial mausoleum. The empress failed to raise her son properly and participated in treason. Strip her of the title of empress and grant her a length of white silk. Carry out the sentence immediately. No, your majesty. Spare me, your majesty. The empress screamed in despair as eunuchs dragged her away like vicious hounds. The second prince collapsed, his face ashen like a dead dog that had lost its soul. Gu Chenyuan, who stood nearby after rendering his great service, hurriedly kowtowed. His Majesty is wise. This commoner has earned merit by reporting the crime. I beg your Majesty to pardon my previous offences. Pardon. The old emperor looked coldly at him. You knew the traitor planned a rebellion, yet concealed it and failed to report it until today. Under the law you share his guilt. Gu Chenyuan's smile instantly froze. Men, give Gu Chenyuan 100 strokes of the heavy paddle and exile him to the frozen reaches of the northwest. He shall never enter the capital again. No, Su Muyan. Save me, Muyan. I did this for you. Please speak one word on my behalf. As the guards dragged him away, Gu Chenyuan burst into miserable, desperate pleas. His voice echoed through the hall and made everyone's blood run cold. I did not spare him even the corner of my eye. He had brought this upon himself, and was now reaping what he had sown. It was precisely the ending he deserved. A bloody political purge came to an end on the day of our wedding. No one in the imperial court dared challenge Pei Yan's authority again. And I, Su Mian, stood beside Pei Yan, and formally became the crown princess of Daxia, below one man and above all others. After the second prince fell, the court stabilized. However, our happy days had not lasted long when a deadly shadow fell over the Eastern Palace. It was 1 week before the new emperor's enthronement ceremony. While reviewing memorials, Pei Yan suddenly spat black blood without warning and collapsed unconscious. The entire Eastern Palace erupted into chaos. I hastily summoned every imperial physician in the palace, and even offered 10,000 gold pieces for renowned healers throughout the realm. Yet after examining his pulse, all of them shook their heads and sighed in despair. Your Highness the Crown Princess, His Highness has been poisoned with a long-lost forbidden toxin, heart erosion. The elderly imperial physician knelt and said in a trembling voice, "This poison is colorless and odorless and has lain dormant in his body for at least 10 years. It has now invaded all 5 organs, and his heart meridians are rupturing. I fear he has no more than 3 days to live. 10 years." I felt as though lightning had struck me, and my entire body trembled violently. 10 years at that time, Pei Yan had been merely an unfavored young prince who had dealt him such a vicious blow. I sat before the sickbed and held Pei Yan's cold fingers tightly. Seeing not a trace of color on the face that had once been so arrogantly wicked, I felt as though a blunt knife were carving into my heart. Without my realizing it, the man who appeared mad on the surface yet cherished me beyond measure had long since etched himself into my flesh and bones. "Pei Yan, open your eyes." My eyes were red and swollen, and my voice was hoarse. "You have not taken me to see all the mountains and rivers of Daxia. You have not spent even one proper day at my side. I forbid you to die." Pei Yan gave no response from the bed. His breathing was so faint it seemed ready to stop at any moment. Just as I approached despair, the doors of the Eastern Palace suddenly opened. A gaunt man in ragged homespun staggered inside. It was Gu Chenyuan. He should have been on the road to exile in the northwest. I did not know how he had escaped. He was now little more than skin and bone, his eyes sunken yet gleaming with an unusually clear light. "Stop. If you do not want him to die, all of you move aside." Gu Chenyuan rasped at the surrounding guards. I sprang to my feet and blocked Pei Yan's bed, my gaze icy. "Gu Chenyuan, why are you here? Have you come to take revenge while you have the chance?" Gu Chenyuan looked at me, a bitter, self-mocking smile curving his lips. "Muyan, in your eyes, I will always be that despicable villain, will I not?" He drew an exquisitely crafted jade vial from inside his clothes and gently placed it on the table. "This is the antidote to heart erosion," Gu Chenyuan said softly. I frowned, unable to believe him. "How do you have the antidote to heart erosion? Were you the one who poisoned him?" "The person who poisoned him was the late deposed empress." Gu Chenyuan shook his head, his eyes carrying the weariness of a man who had seen through the world. "The mentor who took me in years ago had once been the chief imperial physician and an old acquaintance of the deposed empress. She forced my master to prepare heart erosion and feed it to the crown prince when he was young. Burdened by guilt, my master devoted the rest of his life to creating the only antidote which he entrusted to me before his death." He looked deeply at me, his eyes gradually reddening. "I escaped back to the capital not to seek revenge, but to give this to you. I did not believe in free gifts and asked coldly, 'What do you want?' For me to absolve you of your crimes or give you a vast fortune. I want nothing anymore." Gu Chenyuan smiled bitterly at himself as 2 clear tears slid down his haggard face. "Muyan, 3 years ago, I was blind and destroyed everything between us. I stole your wedding dress and broke your heart. This is heaven's punishment for me. My worthless life is not worth saving, but I cannot bear to watch you suffer. Pei Yan is a good man. He deserves far more than I do to stand beside you and protect you." He bowed deeply to me, then turned and staggered toward the doors. At the threshold, he stopped without looking back. "Muyan, once he is saved, I will have repaid the affection I owe you. From now on, neither of us owes the other anything." With that, he strode from the Eastern Palace, his desolate back heartbreaking to behold. I immediately ordered the imperial physician to examine the pill in the jade vial. The elderly imperial physician sniffed it and cried in delight, "Your Highness, it truly is the antidote. His Highness can be saved. His Highness can be saved." I personally dissolved the pill in water and fed it to Pei Yan in less than half an hour. Color truly began returning to Pei Yan's face, and his breathing became strong again. However, before I could sigh in relief, a hidden guard suddenly rushed inside to report, "Your Highness, Gu Chenyuan." He collapsed on the stone steps outside the Eastern Palace and died coughing blood. I paled in shock and immediately hurried outside. Gu Chenyuan lay quietly upon the cold stone steps, his face peaceful and a faint smile of release upon his lips. After examining him, The elderly imperial physician let out a long sigh. Your Highness, no ready formula for the antidote to heart erosion exists anywhere in the world. There is only one method, trading one life for another. The person preparing the antidote must refine the essence of his own blood together with yang-rich herbs continuously for 7 days and nights to create the medicinal catalyst. Young Master Ju had already exhausted every drop of his life's blood before he came to the Eastern Palace. Boom, my mind went completely blank. Looking at Gu Chenyuan lying in a pool of blood, I could no longer stop the tears from pouring from my eyes. So when he said, saving him is also saving myself, he meant he would use his own life to atone for the monstrous wrongs he had committed. In the most resolute way possible, he severed every bond of love, hatred, gratitude, and vengeance between us. Wind swept across the steps of the Eastern Palace and scattered the fallen leaves. We had loved, hated, schemed, and taken revenge. At that moment, every grudge vanished completely like smoke. 7 days later, the old emperor passed away. With the support of all civil and military officials, Crown Prince Pei Yan formally ascended the throne and adopted Yong'an as his reign title. On the day of the enthronement ceremony, golden rays filled the sky beneath brilliant rosy clouds. Wearing a black imperial robe embroidered with a 9-taloned golden phoenix and a coronet of 9 soaring phoenixes, I held hands with Pei Yan, who wore the emperor's dragon robe with 12-tassel crown. Step by step, we climbed the 999 steps leading to the summit of the Hall of Supreme Harmony. Civil and military officials, foreign envoys, and 1 million imperial guards dropped to their knees before us in a vast wave, their voices shaking the heavens. Long live His Majesty! Long live His Majesty! Long may he reign! Long live Her Majesty the Empress! Long live Her Majesty! Long may she reign! Their cries shook heaven and earth and echoed throughout the capital. I stood at the supreme summit of the realm and gazed down upon all living beings and the vast land below, my heart filled with emotion. I had gone from the noble young lady abandoned and mocked outside the top scholar's residence to the Empress of Daxia, mother of the realm and ruler of its mountains and rivers. With my intelligence, wealth, and resolve, I had carved a road to the heavens through an age defined by rigid ranks and privilege. That night, atop the star-plucking tower, a gentle night breeze blew beneath moonlight clear as water. The lights of 10,000 homes across the capital glittered below us like a sea of stars. Pei Yan gently wrapped his arms around my slender waist from behind, rested his chin in the hollow of my shoulder, and greedily breathed in the fragrance of my hair. My Empress, do you like the realm I have given you? His deep voice was filled with boundless affection. I turned, gently traced his handsome brows and eyes, and smiled with dazzling beauty. Your Majesty remembers incorrectly. You did not give this realm to me. We husband and wife conquered it together. Pei Yan laughed softly. His chest shaking, he pulled me tightly into his arms, as though he wished to fuse me into his very bones. Yes, our realm. He looked deeply into my eyes, unprecedented sincerity and obsession shining in their depths. Mu Yan, there is something I have never told you. I raised an eyebrow. What is it? A wicked, calculating smile curved Pei Yan's lips. 3 years ago, Gu Chenyuan encountered bandits on his way to the examinations. I secretly sent men to save him and guided him toward discovering your identity. And after he became top scholar, I deliberately had people praise Liu Ruyan before him and sow discord between the two of you. I stared at him in shock. You began scheming against me even then. Yes. Pei Yan admitted it without hesitation, his gaze burning hot enough to melt me. From the moment you saved me at the Lantern Festival 3 years ago, I decided you could only be my woman in this life. That useless Genyuan never deserved you. I merely helped matters along and allowed his selfish nature to reveal itself. I stared at him in speechless astonishment. From beginning to end, I had believed I chose him. In truth, he had placed an enormous wager and lured me into his game one step at a time. This man's mind was terrifyingly deep. Pretending to be angry, I struck his chest. You scoundrel, Pei Yan. You even dared scheme against me. Pei Yan caught my hand, raised it to his lips, and kissed it deeply, his gaze domineering yet tender. I schemed against everyone beneath heaven. You alone received my entire true heart. He suddenly swept me into his arms and carried me toward the bed as the red curtains swayed in the breeze. Muyan, Daxia's realm of eternal peace belongs to you. He made an eternal vow beside my ear, and I will forever remain your subject at your feet. Outside the window, the bright moon hung high over a realm picturesque as a painting. From that day onward, our years were peaceful, and we grew old hand in hand. To all rational thinkers, this round story has drawn to a close. Marrying the wrong person is the opening move. Buying the right person turns the game around. Now, let us hear the next story. I was accidentally disfigured while tasting medicine for the noble consort. The noble consort took charge and bestowed me in marriage upon the fifth prince, who had been demoted to commoner status. The fifth prince did not like me. He despised my ugly face for humiliating him and refused to acknowledge me as his wife. I knew my place and tried to appear before him as little as possible so that I would not provoke his disgust. Others treated my ugliness as an insult to him, but I could not regard myself as something filthy later. The fifth prince went to tremendous lengths to regain his royal status and gradually returned to favor. Everyone congratulated him. Even my parents brought my younger sister, hoping to place her in the fifth prince's household. A chow, with your appearance, you cannot serve His Highness. Rather than let an outsider benefit, it is better to keep the advantage within the family. His Highness likes your younger sister too. If you do not believe us, see for yourself. The fifth prince truly did like my younger sister. He allowed her to stay beside him, grinding ink, washing inkstones, and adding beauty and fragrance to his study. Whenever he brought gifts back from an outing, there was always one for my younger sister. He even let her choose first from the palace rewards. Everyone said my younger sister would certainly become the fifth prince's secondary consort one day. My younger sister believed so too, yet the fifth prince never brought her into his household. I was unwilling to wait any longer, so I personally requested an amicable separation. The fifth prince looked dazed for a moment before asking indifferently, "Are you serious?" I was somewhat puzzled. What else could I be? Could it possibly be false? Suppressing my questions, I said calmly, "Strictly speaking, Your Highness and I were never truly husband and wife. 3 years ago, we agreed that whether through an amicable separation or a staged death, we would eventually cast off this identity. I believe the time has come. What does Your Highness think?" 3 years ago, an imperial marriage decree from the noble consort bound me to the fifth prince, Zhao Yi. At the time, I was a palace maid disfigured while tasting medicine. He was a fallen prince stripped to commoner status. Under a eunuch's watchful eye, we bowed to heaven and earth and were sent into the bridal chamber. The delighted eunuch returned to report the completion of his task to the noble consort. He and I sat together in silence for a long time, neither of us speaking. Eventually, I became too exhausted and quietly explained my thoughts. "A man like Your Highness should never have a wife such as me. But I truly have no power over this matter. Your Highness has read more books than I and understands far more principles. Why do we not discuss carefully what we should do? I am not unreasonable. If Your Highness has a plan, please tell me." He remained silent, his sword-like brows tightly furrowed and his eyes hiding anger and humiliation. We both understood I was his punishment. They had stripped him of his status as a prince and given him an ugly woman, openly declaring, "A lowly man such as you deserves no more than an ugly wife like this." He understood, so did I, but I could do nothing about it. This was simply what I looked like. The presently Shuyao was an ugly woman whose face was covered in purple scars. Others regarded me as a disgrace, as though I were mud, dog filth, or some equally revolting piece of refuse. But I could not view myself that way. I could not split open my heart for others to see and tell them that beneath the ugliness, I was actually a good person. I could only look on the bright side. I had finally left the palace, no longer needed to rise in the middle of the night, and could eat a hot meal. My good days had only just begun. I should think about how to live well from then on, I said to Zhao Yi. If Your Highness has no other ideas for the moment, why not hear mine first? That day, I explained my proposal. Life had to continue, but I did not want either of us to owe the other. We could live as strangers beneath the same roof without interfering in each other's affairs. If the fifth prince were restored to status one day, I could fate my death or seek an amicable separation. I would cooperate with whatever was most convenient for him. A debt of conscience is the hardest to repay. If your highness is restored in the future, I imagine you would not wish to be accused of abandoning the wife who endured hardship beside you. I am an ordinary person. When I give something, I always hope for something in return. If I devote myself to your highness, I will inevitably indulge in foolish hopes. Therefore, I will not concern myself with your highness, and your highness need not concern yourself with me. We shall each look after ourselves so that everything will remain clear when we part in the future. Only after I finished did he raise his head to look at me, a trace of scrutiny in his gaze. Do you bear no resentment? I fell silent. He was asking whether I resented the noble consort, but I could not answer, just as he did not trust me. I did not trust him. Those who had survived in the palace were always more cautious than others. I smiled faintly. Your Highness, I left the palace at 25 years earlier than I expected. That is a good thing, is it not? That was how Zhao Yi and I first came to know each other. There was no wonder or admiration, only a clean division of our ties. Later, through his own efforts, he regained his place among the imperial princes. I followed him back to a prince's residence, yet continued living as I always had. We did not interfere in each other's affairs and owed each other no favors, so I could also leave with a clear conscience. The only people who disturbed that clear conscience were probably my parents and younger sister. I did not know they were coming to seek refuge with me. Only when they knocked on the gates of the prince's residence did I learn that a flood had struck our hometown. After hearing that I had become a prince's consort, they crossed mountains and rivers to find me, believing they could share in my comfortable life. Unfortunately, the moment we met, we all fell speechless. After hesitating for a long time, my parents asked how I had come to look this way. I could not tell them about the schemes behind the noble consort's bowl of medicine, and could only vaguely say I had fallen ill. Disappointment covered my parents' faces. They spent one night in a guest room. The next day, they said hesitantly, "Achao, you need to compete for his favor. You cannot do it yourself anymore. Why not consider your younger sister? She is only 16 and younger than His Highness. He will like her." They pushed my younger sister before me. At 16, she was in the flower of youth. Even a simple dress and thorn hairpin could not conceal her radiant beauty. Every girl looked beautiful at that age. Unlike me, I was 23, 3 years older than the fifth prince. They hinted that I was old and ugly and could not hold the fifth prince's heart, so I should rely upon my younger sister instead. Their words were utterly practical, yet they stabbed my heart with pain. While I lived in the palace, my hometown had been the moon in the heavens. The anger, obsession, resentment, and hatred of the past had crossed the long river of time, leaving only deep concern and lingering longing. Now my hometown stood before me, yet it left me speechless and on the verge of tears. Life contains too many moments that leave one without words. At that moment, for example, I could not tell them that the fifth prince and I had never shared the affection of husband and wife, and that our union had been nothing more than a whim to entertain the powerful. It was an insult to the fifth prince, and contempt for me. I could only refuse my parents calmly. I packed their luggage myself, gave them the silver I had saved, and told them to rent a house through a broker and find a livelihood. We could discuss everything slowly after they had settled. My parents refused and repeatedly called me a chow. A chow, you must listen. How can you still have such a temper now that you are older? A chow, would we ever harm you? Rather than let an outsider benefit, why not keep the advantage within the family? Better for meat to spoil in one's own pot than be given to someone else. Do you not understand that, a chow? A chow was my childhood name. In the palace, I had longed for someone to call me a chow, the way my parents once had. It was the thought that sustained me there. Yet when I finally heard it again, the sound felt extraordinarily grating. I stopped and said coldly, "Shu Yao, call me Li Shu Yao." It was the name the noble consort's son, the third prince, had once given me. When I was selected for the noble consort's Yongshu palace, she summoned all the new maids, warning us one by one and bestowing new names. The third prince happened to be present. To test him, the noble consort ordered him to name us. When he reached me, he paused lightly and smiled. The moon rises bright, lovely is the beautiful one. Graceful and slender she is, my troubled heart aches. Let her be called Xu Yao. Only later did I learn it was a line from the Book of Odes praising a beauty as lovely as moonlight and so enchanting that she inspired longing. At the time I was 13, and so was the third prince. The compliment sounded like a joke, and no one cared. But when I was 18, those words nearly cost me my life. Believing no one else was in the hall, the third prince whispered beside my ear, "Xu Yao is radiant, and my heart aches with longing. Xu Yao, sooner or later, I will ask mother consort to give you to me." His smile was sincere, with a hint of playful teasing. But I had already dropped to my knees with a thud. The noble consort slowly emerged from within. She looked down at me without a word, then gradually bent over as her long fingernail dragged down my face. My face hurt, but without changing my expression. I thanked the noble consort for her grace. The third prince's face turned deathly pale, and he opened his mouth but said nothing. The noble consort slapped him hard. "Useless creature. If you truly intended to ask, why did you not ask me directly?" That day was truly a turbulent one. The third prince was beaten. I was punished. After my punishment ended, I wanted to please the noble consort and planned to pick osmanthus blossoms to make food. Ignoring the pain in my knees, I rose on tiptoe to reach them. The emperor happened to arrive and stood silently watching me for a long time. Only when the noble consort emerged did the emperor return to his senses and smile. "This girl possesses something of the gentle maiden." An 18-year-old girl was ripe fruit. Everyone wanted to pluck it, regardless of whether the fruit consented. Later, the noble consort fell ill. I tasted her medicine for her, and the first sip filled even my heart with bitterness. Clutching my chest, I collapsed. When I awoke, my face was covered in purple scars. The imperial physician said I was ruined and could not be cured. The noble consort used the incident to thoroughly purge Yongshu Palace, then implicated her enemies and emerged with a splendid victory. Only I was cast aside in a corner of the imperial palace, demoted from a second-rank palace maid in Yongshu Palace to a laundry woman in the clothing bureau. Latter, the fifth prince was stripped to commoner status. The noble consort remembered me and bestowed me upon him in marriage. At 20, I finally left the imperial palace. I had escaped with great difficulty and understood the flashing blades hidden within it. Yet my own family desperately wanted to plunge straight inside. They were naive and reckless, consumed by greed, anger, and resentment, yet I could not explain any of it. Their repeated calls of a chow were not expressions of longing. They were shackles, demands that I return to being the innocent, obedient 13-year-old Lia Chow. I had already seen through it all. I firmly escorted my parents and younger sister from the residence. My parents were furious. My younger sister's eyes filled with tears. Lost in my thoughts and walking with my head lowered, I collided with Zhao Yi. I stepped back half a pace. He rubbed his chest. I hurriedly bowed. The gatekeeper ran over and explained my parents' identities one by one. I said, "I will send them away now." Zhao Yi said, "Let them stay. More people will make the residence lively." It has not been this lively in a long time. Before I could speak, my parents knelt and thanked him for his grace. My younger sister raised her face and smiled sweetly. "Thank you, brother-in-law." Zhao Yi's lips moved slightly, but he did not correct her. I felt as though something were lodged in my throat, and fear unsettled me. They did not know that everyone in the residence called me Miss Liu. No one had ever called me the prince's consort or mistress, and Zhao Yi and I were certainly not husband and wife. My younger sister's word, brother-in-law, filled me with panic. I had a fierce quarrel with my parents. 3 days you may stay in this residence for no more than 3 days. Then you must leave of your own accord. Lia Chow, how can you be so heartless? You refuse to enjoy a wealthy life and insist on suffering instead. You are afraid your younger sister will steal your favor. But what favor did you ever possess? Cruel words between family members cut deepest. Every sentence pierced my heart. I looked at my younger sister. Do you think so too? My younger sister hesitated, her large eyes flickering. I listened to father and mother. I let out a scornful laugh, bitterness filling my heart. When I left home, she had been only 6, an innocent, lovable little girl. She had obeyed me and chased the carriage that took me into the palace until mother caught her. She cried as though her heart were breaking. I remembered I had imagined what she would be like when she grew up, charming, radiant, clever, and quick-witted. Never had I imagined she would become this ignorant and calculating. I suppressed my anger and said each word with grave seriousness. You should listen to the person in this room who has actually gone out into the world, not blindly repeat what everyone else says. If father and mother truly possessed foresight, they would have made a fortune with the silver I sent home instead of bringing you here as refugees. Enraged by my defiance, father tried to strike me as he had when I was a child. But I caught his wrist, I said sharply. Look, even you do not regard me as the prince's consort, yet you believe you can rely upon my status to remain in this residence. Other people are not fools. I will tell you plainly, this imperial marriage was a joke. The 5th prince has never felt affection for me. Remaining here will bring no good result. If you still want me as your daughter, leave in 3 days. I will also leave this place in the future, and then we will still have a chance to reunite. Otherwise, it will not end well. I did not want our reunion to become an immediate farewell. Our meeting rendered meaningless. I stormed away. Father's furious voice sounded behind me. Rebellion. This is truly rebellion. You simply lacked the ability to hold the 5th prince's heart. A Rao would never be like you. I turned and quietly looked back at him. I had always remembered the day I was chosen as a palace maid and taken away in a carriage, while he and mother wept as though their hearts were torn apart. Every memory filled me with sorrow. Only now did I discover that some relatives belonged only in dreams. When they truly appeared before you, they became nightmares. I said nothing more to them, and we became like strangers. They did not care. They were busy currying favor with Zhao Yi. They spoke of hometown delicacies, amusing stories, and familiar scenery, racking their minds for entertaining remarks in hopes that Zhao Yi's gaze would linger a little longer upon my younger sister. A Rao also knew what was expected of her. She revolved around Zhao Yi, advancing step by step from the gate of his courtyard into his study, where she ground ink, washed inkstones, and beautified the room with her fragrant presence. I once considered asking Zhao Yi what he thought, but I stopped outside his door. My younger sister's sweet, innocent laughter came from within. Brother-in-law, give me a name, too. I do not want to be called a Rao. I want a beautiful name like elder sisters. I did not hear Zhao Yi's reply. I turned away and stood in the bamboo grove watching the wind rustle through the leaves. I thought perhaps everyone had the right to run into a wall, and I should respect the choices of those determined to do so. What right did I have to insist that others consider my choice correct? That would be far too arrogant. My choice was useful only to me. I needed to remember that firmly. The days passed one after another. My sorrow was like wild grass swaying in the wind, drifting with the eastern breeze one moment and bending beneath the western wind the next, until thick snow finally buried it and made it a thing abandoned by time. Yet what truly allowed me to let go was a very small matter. On my birthday, my parents reconciled with me. They prepared food from our hometown and made longevity noodles. The bowl of longevity noodles was filled with an abundance of ingredients. I asked where they had obtained the money. My younger sister smiled. Brother-in-law gave it to us. He gives father, mother, and me a monthly allowance. Elder sister, does he not give you one? I ate the noodles in silence. They were delicious. I finished every last bite. When I finished, I finally felt at peace. My parents smiled. A chow. After thinking it over, we realized you still need to speak to His Highness about a Rao. If you do not agree, His Highness will not take a Rao as a concubine. Hey, what are you doing? Stop pushing me. How can you be so disobedient? Ignoring their curses, I pushed them out the door. My heart was completely tranquil. That night I thought about many things. I remembered why I had spoken to Zhao Yi as I did in the beginning. If I had cared for Zhao Yi then, Would I now be enjoying a life of luxury and fine food? If I had shamelessly wielded the imperial marriage decree as authority, would I truly have become a prince's consort? I considered it for a long time until I laughed at myself. Number by nature, I could not stomach that half-cooked meal. Reason told me that if I had truly assumed the identity of Zhao Yi's wife and cared for him in that name, I would only have forced him to hate me. At the time, he had been ruined, and I represented his humiliation. Had I forced myself upon him and demanded that he acknowledge the marriage, I would have become an accomplice to those who harmed him. He would have been too busy hating me to feel gratitude. That remained true even though I had been ruined too and had no choice in the matter. It was as though a woman had her leg broken and hands bound. While she was already miserable enough, the villain threw her into another household and told the ugly man inside, "This woman will be your wife from now on." To that woman was the man truly her husband. Number he was an accomplice. I was grateful I had not become an accomplice, nor forced myself into Zhao Yi's life under the pretense of caring for him so I could later occupy the moral high ground and demand a share of his wealth. I had entered cleanly, and I would leave cleanly. Li Shuyao might have been ugly, but I possessed the integrity of a gentleman. I had not allowed myself to sink or become something filthy. I treated myself well. I enjoyed a rare night of sound sleep, and when I awoke, everything became clear. On the very day I reached that clarity, I came to request an amicable separation. Zhao Yi's brows drew tightly together as he stared at me with burning intensity. "Must you leave?" I relaxed slightly and felt secretly pleased. He did not speak nonsense, drag a row into the matter, or make a hypocritical attempt to keep me. Instead, he faced my question directly. I said calmly, "Your Highness, if our positions were reversed and you were me, would you be willing to remain here?" In name, I was his wife, but in truth, no one acknowledged it. He did not acknowledge it, and neither did I. My name did not appear in the imperial genealogy. The imperial clan court held no record of me. I was not a mistress of the prince's residence. Remaining here meant embarrassment, fear, and unease. Even if I lived here for 10 or 20 years, this place would never be my home. Zhao Yi remained silent for a long time before suddenly speaking. "Li Shuyao, I do not dislike you. We may separate, but you do not have to leave. You may live in that courtyard forever." Perhaps he spoke sincerely, but I merely chuckled. "Your Highness, I want a home of my own. A home where I could eat, sleep, and work in peace. A home where I could make my own decisions, even if I were the only person living there." Zhao Yi looked deeply at me and gently uttered one word, "Very well." The separation agreement was prepared in duplicate. After we signed, a steward would file it with the authorities. I took one copy, carefully folded it, and turned to leave. Zhao Yi suddenly asked, "What about your parents? What will happen to them?" I replied calmly, "I will tell them I am leaving. Whether they go is their decision. Whether they remain is your Highness's decision. Whoever invited them could take responsibility. Whoever objected could refuse. Their grievances had nothing to do with me." I told my parents that I had separated from Zhao Yi and was leaving, then asked whether they would come with me. My parents froze for a moment before suddenly looking relieved, suppressed delight appearing on their faces. "Chao, do not blame father and mother. A person must accept her fate. This is yours. You will always be our daughter, and Rao will care for you in the future. But if you leave, go somewhere far away so people cannot gossip." I froze. Did they think Zhao Yi had separated from me to marry Rao? A glow of happiness spread across Rao's face, and she could not conceal her joy. "Elder sister, do not worry. I will support you in the future. However, you cannot appear before His Highness again." I laughed in anger for a moment. I wanted to slap her hard. After thinking about it, I abandoned the idea. She was naive, foolish, and ignorant of the world. She believed beauty could bridge every impossible chasm. But if beauty were truly invincible, why would the cold palace contain so many abandoned consorts? Before they were cast aside, had they not been beautiful and pleasing? Beauty did not entitle someone to possess everything, just as ugliness did not condemn someone to lose everything. She would understand one day. I only hoped the lesson would not be too cruel. Without a word, I quietly closed the door, turned, and left. When I reached the main gates, the steward was already waiting. Seeing me, he bowed and approached, offering me a banknote for 1,000 taels with both hands. Miss Li, this is a small token from His Highness. Please accept it. His Highness said he is grateful for your companionship over the past 3 years and hopes you will live well in the future. The 1,000-tael banknote seemed to shine. I hesitated for only a moment before accepting it. I said calmly, "Thank His Highness for his reward." The steward froze for a moment, then sighed softly. "Safe travels, Miss Li." I thanked him and stepped lightly across the threshold of the prince's residence. We both understood that once freed from the imperial marriage decree, he was a prince and I a commoner. If I met him in the future, I could only kneel and say, "Greetings, Your Highness." There was nothing wrong with adapting in advance. I bought a courtyard house. I found an ugly stray cat. It had probably lost a fight with another cat. Limping on one leg, it meowed repeatedly at me. Looking at its face, I could not help laughing. It had bowl-cut markings, dark circles around its eyes, and a black spot on its nose. It was uniquely ugly. It had truly grown into the wrong face. I picked it up, examined its leg, and soothed it softly. "It is all right. A little repair will make you well." I carried it to a medical clinic. The physician at the clinic looked surprised. Few people in these times brought cats for treatment. Even humans often could not afford to see a physician. He looked at me, then at the cat, becoming solemn one moment and suppressing a laugh the next. Eventually, he simply kept looking at the cat and stopped looking at me. After splinting the cat's leg, he frowned slightly. "Would you like someone to examine your face as well? I know a physician skilled at treating facial scars." I touched my face and said softly, "Yes, thank you, doctor." I visited the other clinic he recommended and waited in line for a consultation. When I emerged with medicine and sunlight fell upon me, the corners of my eyes grew damp. Because the physician had said, "Why did you not come sooner? Had you come earlier, you would have been cured long ago." Why had I not come sooner? When the imperial physician said my face could not be cured, I had not entirely believed him because the junior physician who usually treated palace maids and eunuchs had winked at me. But I was not certain. I had wondered countless times whether the imperial physician had told the truth later. I understood that truth or falsehood did not matter. For the noble consort to win, my face had to be ruined. Then I entered the clothing bureau, where the laundry never ended. There was little for anyone to say to each other. Everyone's back and waist ached with exhaustion, and we wished only to finish sooner and rest. Immediately afterward came my marriage to the 5th prince. By then I understood this was probably the last remaining use for a pawn like me. And now I could finally seek treatment and receive a definite answer. Suddenly, I felt a small joy that the future had finally arrived. I stroked the kitten in my arms and smiled. "Come, let us go home together." The kitten and I recuperated at home. Once we had mostly recovered, the cat began running outside, and I began searching everywhere for work. I found a position as an instructress for the daughters of a minor official. The family had 2 daughters. The elder Xiao Yue was 16 and awaiting selection for the palace. The younger Xiao Yuetong was 13 and had not yet reached her coming-of-age ceremony, but already accompanied her sister to social events. Because her elder sister would enter the palace selection, she joined the lessons to learn palace etiquette. The purple scars on my face had faded considerably, and my appearance was no longer so frightening. Their father's official rank was also low, and the family did not know that the once deposed 5th prince had been forced to marry an ugly woman. That remained true until the sisters returned from a banquet. The younger sister, Xiao Yetong, said in surprise, "Aunt Shuyao, did you know the 5th prince once married an ugly woman?" At today's banquet, the 3rd prince suddenly quarreled with the 5th prince. The 3rd prince accused him of abandoning his wife as soon as he regained power and said his character was corrupt. Many people were watching, and the 5th prince's face turned black with anger. Without waiting for my answer, she continued on her own. "This selection is not choosing women for His Majesty. It is choosing consorts for the unmarried princes, including the 5th prince. Aunt, which prince do you think has the best character?" Xiao Yue interrupted her younger sister and rebuked her. "Every prince is of the imperial blood. It is not your place to criticize them." Be silent and listen to what Aunt has to say. The two of them raised their eyes and looked at me. But my thoughts had already drifted far away. Were they arguing because of me? Did they truly wish to seek justice for me? I did not think so. They were probably like the noble consort, using me to push down an opponent while building a virtuous reputation for themselves. Most importantly, if the fifth prince had no wife, he could choose another noble young lady as his principal consort, gain new support, and compete with the third prince. Not long after I married the fifth prince, I learned why he had been stripped to commoner status. Like me, he too was an abandoned pawn. At His Majesty's birthday celebration, the crown prince tampered with the third prince's gift. The third prince discovered it early. He could have replaced the gift, but instead used the scheme against its maker and exchanged it with the fifth prince's. When everyone presented their gifts in public, the fifth prince's box was opened and found to contain objects of witchcraft. His Majesty erupted in fury. The third prince produced evidence identifying the crown prince as the culprit. The crown prince immediately retorted by accusing the third prince of slander, and the two attacked each other. His Majesty was enraged but could not punish the crown prince, the son left by his first wife, nor could he punish the third prince, the son of the woman he loved. In the end, he could only place all the blame upon the fifth prince. Did he not know the fifth prince was innocent? He was so intelligent. Of course he knew. But in his heart, his sons were divided into ranks according to birth, affection, and countless other reasons. Some had to be protected, some were valuable, and some could be sacrificed. Unfortunately, the fifth prince, whose mother had been only a palace maid, was the one who could be discarded. When the fifth prince told someone this, suppressed resentment and unwillingness filled his voice. His voice was actually quiet, but the night was too still and the room too empty, magnifying even the smallest anger. I awoke and heard him say he would certainly find evidence and clear his name. But I believed the truth did not matter. What mattered was giving His Majesty a graceful way out. It was the lesson I had drawn from my years as a palace maid. But I said nothing and went back to sleep later. He finally found an opportunity to return to court. I was truly happy for him because it meant my sentence was nearly over. Meeting the two young ladies' burning gazes, I smiled. The eldest young lady is correct. Every prince is excellent, and not for others to criticize. Most importantly, His Majesty is still in the prime of life, and new princes and princesses are born in the palace every year. Everything depends upon the kind of life you wish to lead. What use was there in dragging others down? His Majesty would never surrender the throne, assassinate the emperor. The current emperor was no puppet but a sovereign who truly held power. Who could possibly assassinate him? Xiao Yue blinked and asked no more. She simply studied with greater diligence and caution. Before long, the consort selection banquet prepared for the princes began. Xiao Yue dressed properly and without ostentation, wearing a pale purple gown and a set of pink crystal ornaments at her temples. They were not valuable, but they looked elegant, refined, and gentle. I waited at the residence for news, idly scratching the ugly cat in my arms. After its leg healed, it lost its desire to roam but loved basking in the sun. People and cats were alike. Only a major upheaval could change their temperaments. Xiao Yue returned at dusk. Summoner supported her as she descended, and her steps carried unusual solemnity. The maid beside her smiled. She was selected young lady will become the fifth prince's secondary consort. Everyone cheered. Xiao Yuetong cried out and threw her arms around Xiao Yue, calling her elder sister. The entire group rejoiced. I felt dazed. I could never have anticipated this result. Only from the surrounding discussion did I learn that Xiao Yue had initially been rejected at the consort selection banquet. Someone asked how she felt. Neither humble nor arrogant, she answered. This subject's daughter was rejected because her cultivation was insufficient. She need only cultivate herself further. Those words made the fifth prince raise his head. Afterward, he selected her as his secondary consort. Everyone said they must share a remarkable destiny, but that night, Xiao Yue came to my courtyard where I was already waiting for her. She froze for a moment, then smiled. Aunt was waiting for me. I am sorry, I did not want to do it either. Before attending the selection banquet, I always believed I was outstanding. I told myself to remain modest and conduct myself with dignity. But when I arrived, I discovered how ridiculous I was. Every woman there was stronger and better than I. At first, I did not favor the fifth prince, nor did I wish to use you as leverage, but I was rejected. I had no choice but to take a chance. I did not expect to succeed. It seems the fifth prince does feel something for you. Aunt, do you resent me? I looked at her quietly. Stubbornness and fear hid in the young woman's eyes. She feared criticism, yet stubbornly protected her pride. It was a complicated emotion, as though she could not bear to lose, yet believed she ought to accept defeat, I said. I was waiting for young lady to arrive so I could bid you farewell. I lifted my bundle and picked up the kitten. The sky was not yet fully dark, and the lanterns outside were still lit. It was a good time to travel. I quietly left. Xiao Yue called after me. Aunt Shuyao, do you not resent me? Summonet had once asked me a similar question. Do you bear no resentment? At the time, I had not told the truth. In the beginning, I had indeed felt resentment. I had once been beautiful and experienced the benefits beauty brought. The instructress liked me greatly and always gave me the first opportunity. Eunuchs treated me with extra courtesy when I ran errands outside. Even princes allowed their gazes to linger upon me. Compared with palace maids of ordinary appearance, I had been far more fortunate, but disfigurement made every invisible advantage disappear. Wherever I went, people despised me. I truly had felt resentment and hatred, but later I understood that perhaps it had been the best path for preserving my life. What woman could tolerate her husband and son desiring the same woman? Perhaps the noble consort spared my life because I was genuinely innocent. If I had not dropped to my knees that day and had instead flirted with the third prince, the bowl would not have contained medicine to disfigure me. It would have contained poison to kill me. The noble consort had stayed her hand. Once I understood, I felt grateful that I had kept to my proper place, indulged in no foolish fantasies, and never treated others as fools. Even now, I could not tell the truth. How could I bare my heart to someone so quick to adapt to changing circumstances? I was not a fool either. I smiled. I did not deliberately conceal that experience. It was an absurd episode, and I avoided mentioning it so I could feel better. Young lady discovered my identity because you are intelligent. Young lady made good use of the bargaining piece in your hand because you are resourceful. If young lady feels you have wronged me, I have one request. If you one day become mistress of the fifth prince's residence, please spare my younger sister's life. She is a foolish girl who has never seen the world. She is far less intelligent than young lady and very easy to handle. For the sake of our time as teacher and student, please merely drive her from the residence. She is a coward and will not dare cause trouble again. Xiao Yue examined me carefully before answering indifferently. Very well. The maid beside her gave me a tray of silver. I accepted it, thanked her, and turned to leave. I thought the capital probably thwarted my bonds of family, love, and friendship, but favored my wealth. I had earned enough money here to last a lifetime. From then on, I could slowly decide what I truly wished to do. I did not seek another position as an instructress. Instead, I studied medicine under the physician who had treated my scars. Because the scars on my face had remained untreated for too long, some marks persisted even after most had faded and could only be completely concealed with cosmetics. I thought there might be many others like me, disfigured by a single accident. If medicine could help them live better lives, I was willing to work toward it. Most people in the world were ordinary. They despised poverty and loved wealth. They disliked ugliness and favored beauty. Even a sage could not make everyone abandon such small flaws. I had no desire to fight the entire world. I compromised where I should and held firm where I could. There was no need to proclaim my moral purity and create enemies for myself. Living was already difficult. I merely wanted the road through my life to be smoother, nothing more. Before long, Xiao Yue was married. The ceremony was simple and unremarkable compared with those of the other princes. But Xiao Yue soon became gravely ill. I heard a maid in the residence poisoned her mistress and was expelled. That maid was outrageously arrogant. She insisted her elder sister was the legitimate princess consort and called secondary consort Xiao an imposter. What nerve! If her elder sister truly were the princess consort, would she still be a maid? What a joke! Besides, everyone knows the fifth prince was once forced to marry an ugly wife. He hated that woman. Why would he care for her family? The moment I heard it, I knew a row had been driven out. I hired several young beggars to discover where my parents and younger sister had gone. They gave me a location, and I quietly went to look. My parents were weeping, and my younger sister was screaming. Her face was covered in red rashes. Anger and unwillingness consumed her. Xiao Yue resented me for being more beautiful, so she deliberately ruined my face. I will never spare her. When His Fifth Highness returns in a few days, I will stop him and accuse her. His Highness will certainly help me. My parents hesitated. They were older now. After running into one wall, they already wished to retreat. But my younger sister refused to surrender. Too many ideas had been fed to her, and she could no longer stop herself. I thought perhaps she needed to crash hard into one more wall before she could completely release her obsession. Before long, the opportunity came. His Fifth Highness returned. The moment he stepped down from his carriage, my younger sister charged from a corner. The guards stopped her, but she had already shouted what she wished to say. Weeping, she gazed infatuatedly at Zhao Yi, exposed the red rashes across her face, and begged him to deliver justice. But Zhao Yi merely watched her hysteria calmly, then quietly said, "Everything shall be handled according to secondary consort Xiao's decision." My younger sister froze. This was not what she had imagined. "Your Highness, will you not deliver justice for me?" Zhao Yi smiled. He slowly approached my younger sister and said indifferently, "If I were to deliver justice for anyone, the person most entitled to receive it would be your elder sister." My younger sister fell speechless. Zhao Yi said, "Go home, this is not a place you should visit." My younger sister refused to accept it. "But you let me enter your study, grind ink for you, and even drank the soup I prepared. Those are a maid's duties. But your Highness brought me gifts and let me choose from your rewards. I thought you would share some with your elder sister. Your elder sister would not accept anything from me." My younger sister stopped struggling. She stood frozen, unable to speak. As Zhao Yi was about to go inside, she suddenly summoned a burst of strength, like a dying fish making one last leap, and demanded shrilly, "Then why did you keep me after elder sister left? Why did you not drive me out?" Zhao Yi looked deeply at her but did not answer. He simply continued inside. The gates of the prince's residence slowly closed, with no one restraining her any longer. My younger sister collapsed limply to the ground and wept uncontrollably. "Your Highness, you ruined me. You destroyed my life. I hate you. I hate you to death." She cried as though her heart were being torn apart, as though every girlish hope inside her poured away with her tears. I remembered myself at 16. At that age, the palace maids who shared my room had also imagined the future, judged which prince was best, and fantasized about what we would do if a prince favored us. We had laughed together. We assigned the ugly and gloomy princes to the girls we disliked and reserved the handsome, good-tempered ones for ourselves. Though they were merely words, they still stirred our young hearts. The supervising auntie reprimanded us harshly, saying we were toads dreaming of swan meat and should first worry about surviving in the palace. Her words unexpectedly became prophecy. Later, one after another, the women from that room died, fell ill, or were maimed. In the end, hardly any remained whole and unharmed. Yet I still remembered that night. A group of palace maids, exhausted after a full day of work, returned to their room and shared girlish fantasies with the sisters beside them. It was a rare moment when we seemed fully alive. Reality was too bitter. That small, beautiful dream had been one of the few bright colors in our dreary lives. My younger sister had also dreamed such a beautiful dream. Now the dream had merely shattered. Eventually, she too would awaken. My parents took my younger sister home. She remained ill for a time. Only when the rashes spread across more of her face did my parents forcibly take her out to seek treatment. When I saw them enter from behind the counter, I immediately crouched down and hid. Master glanced at me with knitted brows, then went to receive them, perhaps sensing something. He examined my younger sister while asking how she had ended up this way. My younger sister began to cry. My parents sighed and said someone had harmed her. Her mistress insisted my daughter had poisoned her medicine and forced my daughter to drink it herself. She became like this afterward. Doctor, can she still be cured? Yes, but it will require some effort. She must keep drinking the medicine. It will itch, but she absolutely must not scratch. I will also prescribe an ointment. The rashes should disappear in 7 or 8 days. Did her mistress bear some grudge against her? How ruthless. Master wanted gossip, but my parents merely sighed at length and fell silent. They probably knew the things they had done were too shameful to mention. People instinctively defend themselves, yet they could not even defend this. Master said nothing more and charged an extremely high price. My parents were astonished. Why is it so expensive? Master answered awkwardly. Young lady's skin is delicate and requires fine medicine. I can use cheaper ingredients, but they may leave pockmarks if young lady does not mind. We mind. My parents immediately paid. They left, complaining and sighing. My younger sister had lost all hope. She did not utter a word from beginning to end and needed someone to support her. Even as she walked, I sat on the floor hugging my knees, my body hidden behind the tall counter. I stared at the ground, lost in thought. They were willing to spend so much to treat my younger sister. Why had they never asked whether my face could be cured? Why had they been unwilling to repair me? Why had they abandoned me from the very beginning? I looked up. Master was peering over the counter at me. Seeing me return to my senses, he smiled. I have a nephew. He is a good young man. Would you like to meet him? I met Master's nephew. He was a good man named Song Yiji. He was not exceptionally handsome, nor were his abilities extraordinary. He was simply a clean-hearted, clear-minded young man. Perhaps because many of his elders practiced medicine, he had grown accustomed to life and death from childhood and possessed a certain open-mindedness. He did not wish to study medicine or become an official. Instead, he enjoyed business and was learning the merchant trade. I did not answer immediately. We spent time together first to see whether we suited each other. During that period, I also gathered news of my parents. My parents had spent much of their silver treating my younger sister. Moreover, because they had been expelled from the 5th Prince's residence, so suddenly they had brought very few possessions with them. After living in the capital for some time, they could no longer endure the expense. They considered looking for me, but I never appeared. With no connections through which to seek news of me, they could only give up. Perhaps that was the tragedy between us. 10 years had diluted their love for me, so they felt little sorrow when I left. Only when they needed me did they regret not knowing where I had gone. They had been too arrogant. Poor people who suddenly gained wealth, they believed everyone else was beneath them and could hardly wait to kick aside the inconvenient daughter blocking their path. Yet they never considered whether the wealth would last or whether they possessed the ability to hold it for long. And my love for them had been exhausted by every quarrel after our reunion. Becoming strangers was never accidental. It was the inevitable result of our choices. I merely regretted that my little home contained only the kitten and me, not my parents and younger sister. They had once had the chance to live there. By September, my parents could no longer endure. They planned to return to our hometown. His Majesty was wise, and post-disaster reconstruction in our hometown was progressing well. They still had a house and fields there, and could continue living decent lives. But when they stood beside the docks and looked back at the vast capital, tears suddenly fell. Song Yiji walked past them and inadvertently dropped a purse. Father picked it up and tried to call after Song Yiji, but he had already disappeared. The boatman urged everyone to board quickly. The crowd swept my parents onto the boat. They stood on the deck and looked down, seemingly searching for Song Yiji. But amid a vast sea of people, all hurrying to and fro, finding one person was nearly impossible. The boat departed. The people on shore vanished from sight. I emerged from my hiding place. The wind along the river whipped my hair wildly and scattered my tears before they could form a single trail. I tasted the salt of my tears and understood the flavor of melancholy. Suddenly I understood a truth. Some people lose their home the moment they leave their hometown, even if that place is still called home. They understand it is somewhere to which they can never truly return. Song Yiji hesitated, then said softly, "You may borrow my shoulder." I could not help smiling as I lowered my head and wiped away my tears. Thank you, young master. But there is no need. He turned his head away, the tips of his ears faintly red. I am wearing new clothes, they are not dirty. I laughed again, and the last of my sorrow quickly dispersed. Song Yiji, you are truly irritating. Then would hitting me twice make you feel better? Could he allow me to grieve properly for a moment? I truly wanted to pound him. Much later, Song Yiji and I married. He continued trading and I continued practicing medicine. Our days were peaceful and ordinary without any great events. Then, during another celebration of His Majesty's birthday, news spread from the palace that the noble consort had been disfigured. The third prince was searching everywhere for renowned physicians to enter the palace and treat her. The third prince's guards heard that Master was a renowned physician skilled in treating scars and blemishes. Without allowing any protest, they took Master and me into the palace. I was forced into the palace once again. When we reached Yongshu Palace, a group of physicians was already waiting outside. The voices of the third prince and noble consort occasionally sounded from within, taking the opportunity. I wiped my face with my sleeve and removed all my cosmetics. Then I crushed a blade of grass I had secretly picked along the road and smeared its juice across my face. My complexion soon turned sallow as though I were ill. Before long, it was our turn to enter. I lowered my head, hid behind Master, and listened as he examined her. But I had forgotten. No matter how low I bowed my head, the noble consort lying down could still see my face. The noble consort raised a hand and ordered everyone to leave except Master and me. She asked softly, "Have you married?" I raised my head slightly and met her gaze. The first palace to which I was assigned was Yongshu Palace. I spent 5 years there and attended the noble consort for 5 years. I was not surprised that she recognized me at a glance. I replied, "Yes, this common woman married a merchant. He is a good man, and this common woman likes him very much." The noble consort nodded and said nothing more. She merely decided to use Master's medicine. Before we departed, she bestowed a large tray of silver upon us and sent us out of the palace. In the outer hall, the third prince wanted to ask Master about the noble consort's condition, but she summoned him inside. I sighed slightly in relief. But as we left the palace, we encountered the fifth prince, who was also preparing to leave. He seemed to have been waiting for me and stared blankly for a long time when I arrived. I touched my face. It had healed and no longer looked so frightening. Yellow plant juice covered it, so I probably looked somewhat ridiculous. The fifth prince returned to his senses, walked ahead, and led us out of the palace. He suddenly spoke. "Your parents and younger sister are living well in your hometown. You need not worry. Your younger sister married a man into the family. His character is acceptable, and the two of them should live well together. The new county magistrate in your hometown is an upright official. The region will soon prosper." The outer gates slowly drew nearer along the road. We encountered the emperor hurrying to visit the noble consort, and everyone knelt in salute. From a distance, I glanced at His Majesty's back. His steps were vigorous and his bearing light, making him look more youthful than the noble consort. Perhaps years of worry had aged her. Though she was many years younger than the emperor, she now looked somewhat old. At last, we reached the palace gates. The fifth prince stood at the entrance and said softly, "I did not expel your parents and younger sister, because I thought perhaps one day you would return for them. But from beginning to end, you never came. Our destinies always seem to fall a little short. If I had found a physician to treat your face back then, would everything have been different?" After thinking, I asked, "May I ask how your highness gets along with secondary consort Xiao?" Zhao Ye scoffed and said nothing. I understood well enough Xiao Yue was decisive. Though she also spoke of repairing things, what she actually did was throw them away. If she disliked something, she discarded it. If something blocked her path, she disposed of it. But destruction was easy. One needed only a hammer striking here and there, and even the finest object would break. Repairing something was far more difficult. It required some patience, some perseverance, and some love. She possessed none. He believed she did. They would both disappoint each other. I said calmly, "Your Highness, one can always find faults when determined to look. If there is truly a problem, Your Highness must learn to repair it yourself." I bowed to him, turned and left. I remembered the 3 years of our marriage when tables, chairs and stools in the house often broke. He would frown and say to throw them away. I would say we should repair them because most things could be repaired. He would ask, what if it cannot be repaired? Then throw it away. I had repaired some things and discarded others. Unfortunately, no one had ever thought to repair me. Fortunately, I had repaired myself. Everyone must learn to mend her own life. Only after walking a great distance did I remember I had not told him. The emperor looked as though he would live for many, many years. After thinking, I decided it was better left unsaid. I had escaped the palace with great difficulty and must never entangle myself in it again. When Song Yiji's and my child was 3, news came that the noble consort had passed away. The year our second child was born, the third prince was stripped to commoner status and executed with a cup of poisoned wine. When my eldest daughter was 10, the 5th prince's mistakes were uncovered, and he was sent to a barren fief. Xiao Yue separated from him, and his struggle for the throne came to a complete end. New princes continued to be born in the palace. His Majesty truly outlasted every person who coveted his throne. On the day the 5th prince departed, I went to the riverside docks. He looked desolate, and seemed to sense my presence as he turned in my direction. We stood far apart and did not exchange a single word. Yet I felt he had finally let go. All the greed, anger, and obsession in the world ultimately dissolve into the emptiness of a dream. A person who always stares at what belongs to others cannot walk the road beneath her own feet. I would teach my children to take every step of their own path with steady feet. Even if they made a mistake, it would not matter. A little repair would make it right. If it truly could not be repaired, then they should throw it away. Do not cling to the past, look forward, and in time you will find happiness.